Hello and welcome. My name is Ryan Hardesty, and I am the Executive Director here at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at Washington State University. I want to thank you for joining us from wherever you may be this afternoon. Perhaps you're joining us in conjunction with WSU's Family Weekend. If that's the case, welcome to our program. Let us first begin by acknowledging the Washington State University Pullman campus is located on the homelands of the Nimiipuu tribe and Palouse people. We acknowledge their presence here since time immemorial and recognize their continuing connection to the land, to the water, and to their ancestors. I must really say the annual Masters of Fine Arts Thesis exhibition is really one of our favorites. Every year, the goal is to give student artists a real professional experience that will serve them well as they kind of go out into their future and interact with other museums and galleries. While the exhibition is a focused conclusion, it's also a celebration, but it also really marks an exciting transition toward a professional career. Working with Stephanie Broussard this last year has just been a complete pleasure, a complete joy. I'd like to now turn to Michael Holloman, Associate Professor in the Department of Fine Arts, who will introduce our featured artist, Stephanie Broussard. After Stephanie's gallery talk, the museum's education coordinator, Kristen Becker, will facilitate a question and answer session. Michael, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. A note on this year's exhibition: due to complications with COVID-19, members of the graduating class of 2021 were given the option to either graduate this year or extend their stay in the program one more year. This also reflects the department's transition from a 2-year graduate program to a 3-year program for our Master of Fine Arts degree. With that said, it's a true honor to introduce Stephanie Broussard, a student who I've had the pleasure to work with for the last 2 years here in the Department of Fine Arts. Stephanie was enthusiastically welcomed to WSU after she received her BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2019. She grew up in the Northwest, with her family still residing in Olympia. Stephanie is currently a graduate instructor teaching beginning drawing and also an art history teaching assistant. Her recent paintings address the perception of space, the human body, and its engagement with the complexity of our contemporary socially restricted environment. With that, I welcome Stephanie Broussard.
Thank you, Michael, for that really generous opening. I want to thank everyone for being here, first of all. I really appreciate you giving me your time and attention. I want to thank the museum for having me and putting my work up. And I also want to thank my parents for driving out here. They're kind of my cheerleaders in the exhibit right now. And I also am going to be talking about my MFA thesis exhibition today, Remembered Spaces. So my show is up at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. And before I start, I would like to give photo credit to Sean Sullivan and Megan Marsh Pine for documenting my paintings in this space. So here's the exhibition. My paintings provide new perspectives to everyday spaces, specifically everyday spaces that I've experienced in my life. And in this body of work, I am interested in exploring the following contrasting spatial themes, which I will elaborate more as the talk goes on. So in this body of work, I'm exploring themes of distance and closeness, interior and exterior, cityscape and landscape, spiritual and physical, and presence and absence. There's a lot happening in these paintings, so I'm gonna try and slow down. Whenever I get nervous, I talk really fast. So the wooden cutouts that are within this space, they extend beyond the canvas and serve as a visual and emotional extension to the paintings and the painterly language that I utilize within my work. The act of visually inverting and flipping, turning and shifting, and rearranging my personal surroundings is a cornerstone of my practice right now. I'm really just trying to see how I can take my surroundings and look at it in a new perspective and think about it differently through the act of painting, which is something I do every day. So I am a systematic painter, or that's what I like to call myself. I give myself a set of really strict rules, and then within that rule, I'm able to create a lattice to interweave narrative and color theory and personal reflection of these surroundings. And I found that by creating these rules for myself, I'm able to dive deeper and expand upon those things, whether it's rules about what imagery to use or the space itself. I feel as though I thrive when I give myself those specific, strict rules to follow. So here is an image, just giving you a little context of space or the size of the images. I'm about 5'7", 5'8", and a lot of these paintings are, the two you see on the image right now are 5 foot by 6 foot. So they're really large, as you can also see in this image of me next to the painting. It's big. It's a big painting. So the first three paintings I want to discuss in this talk is about distance and closeness. And so this is a narrative triptych. And I'm going to talk about how it's reflecting on the physical distance between my partner and I over the past 2 years. So this first image is called Pelluced. I thought it refers to the land and the space that I'm in right now. We're in the Palouse region. That's where I'm at least. And it's a self-portrait talking about my past 2 years in Pullman and my newfound engagement with this specific landscape. The landscape is Kamiak Butte, for those of you who know Pullman well, and the landscape goes through my body in this image. I was thinking of it as a conversation between land and human, and it's specifically focusing on the actions I've been taking over this past 2 years. For instance, there are 5 hands that are circling the image in a kind of a continual act of painting while also being painted. And so I think of these hands as kind of a visual pun between what is being painted and what is painted already. The next image in this triptych is called Chicago Local 476, and it's a portrait of my partner, Matthew. Local 476 is the film mechanics union that he's a part of. So he's currently in Chicago working in the film industry, and he's a very tall human. He's 6'7", and I was interested in making the skyscrapers around him also be seen through his body as though he were a skyscraper or becoming a skyscraper himself. Within these two paintings, I was thinking about how where we are in space influences how our bodies and how we interact with that space changes. For instance, my interaction being in the Palouse region is much different than being in Chicago, because of the landscape and because of the way you're able to see the world around you. I was also interested in the congruency between the repetition of the windows and the skyscraper, the patterning on the chair, and also the repetitive action of learning a new skill. The physical distance between us was only exaggerated with COVID. And in each of these images, we have face masks alluding to the current time period. The third image in this triptych is Embrace. It is a portrait of my partner and I together. We stand solid. The landscape isn't being shown through our bodies. And we're acknowledging the viewer's presence by smiling at them And this painting serves as a placeholder for the longing I experience and how much I miss being around him. And the vertical landscapes on either side, for instance, the cactus on the right side is representative of him being from Arizona, whereas the image on the left is representative of Mount Rainier, or where I grew up in Olympia, Washington. Okay. So now I want to talk about these 4 paintings and go in depth. This is the first thing you see when you walk into the gallery as well. So this painting is called Concurrent. Concurrent means simultaneous or happening at the same time. And in this painting, I was exploring themes of interior space and exterior space. And I wanted to kind of challenge the binary between inside and outside spaces. And instead of thinking of them as separate, think of each of them as a continuation of one another. I wanted the upside down kitchen to provide a new perspective of an interior space. And the cardinal in the middle of the painting is representative of growing up Catholic. This is also a very personal image to me, as this is the house I grew up in for most of my life, the kitchen being the kitchen I grew up with, and then on top of the roof is the suburban space that I grew up and know really well. At the bottom is my dad. He's putting this antifungal spray or powder on the roof. And when I took this image, he was in that act of putting this antifungal powder on. And I just thought it was too funny to not include. And I also want to point out how the cardinal's wings just barely break the plane between the interior space and the exterior space, and thinking about how that could be used as a representation for challenging these binaries and thinking of them as more of a continuation. This next painting, Omen, addresses the themes of cityscape and landscape. And I wanted to reflect on how a city space grows, the natural spaces around it diminish. The skull in the center of the painting refers to Georgia O'Keeffe's Cow Skull, Red, White, and Blue. And in that painting, she talks about how the desert's enduring beauty and strength of the American spirit. I'm appropriating this skull as a symbol of desolation and societal decay. Above the bull skull, I have a blooming yellow dahlia, and below I have a dead flower. I was thinking of this as representation of the cycle of life and how as one thing grows, another thing diminishes. The dahlia is a symbol for positive change, kindness, and commitment. And there's just an inverse relationship when we think about the growth of a cityscape and the reduction of the natural spaces that get taken over when those spaces grow. The top landscape is taken from Washington State, while the bottom landscape is a skyline of Chicago. So they're also important personal images from my past as well. This next image, Party Favor, is speaking on themes of absence and presence, or thinking about parties or the lack thereof during a global pandemic. And I'm thinking about the narrative that portrays the feeling of being absent or in the presence of others. The replacement of the figure with sky is a direct nod to the surrealist Rene Magritte and how he would use silhouetted cloudscapes in lieu of the figure. And I came into WSU and this program as a figurative painter, and I'm now leaving more of a painter who thinks about the in-between spaces, the space in between the figures. And I think that was a really important moment for me. This painting also is an image of my friends in Chicago, and it also thinks about how I removed myself from that space. I removed myself from Chicago and came to Pullman for my graduate degree. And I had to figure out a new sense of identity and a new sense of place within Pullman, Washington. Also, the clouds serve as a visual pun for having your head in the clouds. The next slide, One-Way Ticket, reflects on aspects of the spiritual and the physical world. I'm interested in examining the complex and dynamic interactivity between the physical and the spiritual world. I wanted this to also serve as a visual pun between the light at the end of the tunnel and it also just being a DC Metro station. The moon, Venus, and Mercury align towards the center of the metro station, and the yellow hands are American Sign Language for the moon. The mushrooms at the bottom of the painting are symbols of decay and thinking about that cycle that continues as things die and then are brought back into the world. And I also wanted to contrast the relationship between the ephemeral and the physical nature of existence and how we kind of exist between those two worlds. So just to recap and to show you the space one more time, I want to now talk about these cutouts that I have placed throughout the gallery. So this first cutout that I made, I wanted them to be seen as a three-dimensional object and to be seen in the round because I have mostly made paintings that exist flat on a wall. And I wanted to challenge myself to make something to be seen in the round. This painting is in reference to Embrace, or the painting of my partner and I holding each other. This is a One-Way Ticket cutout, and these are painted on these are macro or detailed versions of the paintings that they reference. For instance, this is from One-Way Ticket, or the one with the metro station. And I took the image of the mushroom and then cut that out and then painted images from the wall of the metro station onto it. This is a concurrent cutout, and this is suspended in the gallery space. And so some are freestanding and some are suspended from the ceiling. And these cutouts serve as kind of visual and emotional extensions of the language that I've created in this body of work. This is a Paloused cutout. This is also suspended across from the original painting in this space. And by placing these cutouts in the gallery, I extended the painting from the canvas into the space of the gallery by creating a visual and spatial puzzle for visitors to navigate through. It's been really fun seeing people come into the space and point where each of the cutouts imagery is from in the gallery. This final cutout is from Chicago Local 476. And I made these cutouts by photographing the painting that I finished and then tracing it on Illustrator and then cutting them out using the CNC router. Thank you, JJ. And I realized that in the process of making these, I realized that I was cutting out the objects in the painting, and yet I was talking about the space within each of the images. And so for the last cutout that I did, I realized I should try cutting out the space of the image instead of cutting out the object within the image. So this last one I call lattice, and it is an 8-foot by 4-foot structure. And I compiled 3 separate paintings together, and I digitally traced it on Illustrator. And then I cut it out on the CNC router, and then I painted it. The images that I took from it is the concurrent, one-way ticket, and then party favor on the bottom. And then as I installed it in the gallery, the people who walked around it became part of the gallery and the image itself. If I can get this to play. Why is it not playing? Oh, there we go. Sorry. So I was interested in how people who are outside of the gallery on the window it's up against also became part of the experience of this image, as well as those who went into the gallery itself and looked at it became part of the space within the object itself. All right, so of all these things that I've made and of all these images, I was interested in having these paintings reimagine different ways in which I interact with my personal surroundings and reflect on remembered spaces from my past. In the face of a global pandemic where we're advised to keep 6 feet distance from others and other people in our community, we face a reality where we are continually considering the space between ourselves and others. And in this body of work, I found myself thinking more about the in-between space from others and how that space allows for room to explore the objects and the creatures and the structures that make up our realities. I'm interested in maintaining a continual dialogue between us as humans and that which makes up our environment and that which exists around us, so we can foster a mutually beneficial and respectful interaction so that we can promote a healthy environment across all spaces. But my paintings also contain more than everyday spaces. I'm interested in these images as emotionally and personally charged places that I have selected to paint. They're remembered spaces from my past that I have questioned and altered and turned upside down and revisited and tried to see in a new way. So I want to thank you so much for your time and attention. You can always check me out on my Instagram at @ssbroussard or my website at stephaniebroussard.net. And once again, I want to thank Sean Sullivan and Megan Marshpine for helping me document this show. So.
I'd like to invite all of Stephanie's fellow MFAs from the Fine Arts program to turn on the videos. And we'll have you unmute yourselves one by one so that you can ask her questions. I should have said before I said that, I'm Kristen Becker. I'm the education coordinator here at the museum. And we're really excited to have Stephanie joined by her MFAs for some questions now. If you're a viewer who's been chatting, feel free to send some questions in the chat too. We may not have time for all of them, but we'll be passing them on to Stephanie. So Shanda, would you like to go ahead and go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. That was really great. I love seeing your work. I've had the privilege of going in the space and seeing it too, and it's amazing. My question is about the intimate nature of your work. You spoke about that a few times, how a lot of your imagery is really personal. So I'm wondering how you provide opportunities for your viewers to enter the work.
Yeah, I am really interested in keeping what I paint in my images open to interpretation. And yet, if people want to know more about the personal nature of my work, I'm absolutely happy to talk to them about that. I think the use of color and bright color is an entryway. I'm really interested in having representational images in my work as well as an entryway for people to experience the work, such as a cityscape or a group of friends or an interior space and a bird or different things that we kind of encounter and know about in our own lives that people can take and interpret for themselves in their own work. I also am interested in, I think that the puzzle aspect within the space for people to experience and navigate through is also a way for people to connect with the work because they're able to put things together themselves and make those connections. I'm also okay with my work being really personal and making work about my own experience as a way to connect with others who may have similar experiences.
Siri, I think you're up next if you're here. There you
Yes,
are.
I'm here. Yep. Thanks for your artist talk, Stephanie. I'm very proud to be your friend and colleague. So my question is about this transference of space, these spaces, experiences, emotions, moments through your studio space. So could you maybe talk about how you think about your studio space in relationship to these spaces? Do you view it as like a place of intersection, expansion, etc.? And then second part of that is, has this experience of making this body of work in that maybe more compressed space shifted the way you look back on these places or experience the world around you?
Yes. All right, so I'm going to tackle the first part of that question, which was about studio space. It was really interesting making these paintings because they're so large in relationship to the size of my studio. So I was often only able to have maybe 2 or 3 of these paintings in there at a time. And so I think the continual act of having to move these paintings and rearrange them and turn them upside down, I think absolutely affected the way I experience and view this work. I think anywhere a painting will change the way you experience a painting. And I feel as though everywhere I make paintings affects how I paint something. For instance, when I was living in Chicago, I think my paintings they have a similar language to them, but they're very different subject matter. As I was making images about people at dinner parties, I was making a lot of figurative work. And then I came to Pullman, and I have, it's a great studio space. I'm really happy to have a studio space to work in. But it was kind of a challenge to make some of these 5-foot by 6-foot paintings in that space. And so I think the compression that you talk about is absolutely something I think about in relationship to how we experience the world around us and how we experience space and how that is compressed in a flat 2-dimensional painting. And that I think experiencing that in a painting is what pushed me to make these cutouts so that they would extend into the space itself. I don't know if that answered the second part of your question.
I think it did. Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay. Thanks, Siri.
Adam, would you like to go next with your question?
Yeah, and actually that kind of leads into my question too of like, so the place being significant of where you make these and how it transforms the piece. could you see these becoming more, even large? Because I know you like to work with large paintings. Could you see these becoming even larger and in or are they meant to be much more personal and seen in a closed space?
You definitely cut out there for a second, but I think you were referring to mural spaces, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since that you like to work large, could you see these being translated into a mural kind of space so that it could be involve that outdoor space even more? Or do you find that they're more successful as a space interior wise?
I would actually love to experiment with making large scale murals and also bringing paintings outside. I think that's rich territory to explore. And especially right now in our current climate, having more outside shows might be something that engages people further and makes them feel more comfortable to experience in that space. If you have any murals, hit me up. I would love to make a mural.
Autumn is next.
Hi, yeah. Stephanie, it's been great being able to witness you make these throughout the semester. And you did talk a little bit about the significance of filling some of your figures with the surroundings and the landscape. But I guess my question for you is, how do you decide which figures will absorb the surroundings and which ones will stay more representational?
That is a really great question. So in the triptych that I have, in talking about distance and closeness and thinking about being away from my partner and being close, specifically in those where I'm having the landscape show through the body, I wanted the ones where we're apart from each other to be see-through so that it refers to what we're doing in those spaces and how those spaces are affecting us and changing the way we experience the world around us in relationship to the one that's in the middle where they're solid and they're not see-through. I wanted that to be a direct representation of when we are back together and how we can figure out what we want to do next and how the places where we came from affect who we are, but also bleed into how we interact with each other and affect and change each other.
Now,
I hope that answered your question.
I think it's Megan's turn next. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you. Congratulations again, Stephanie. And it was really lovely to see these in person when I got to see the exhibition the other day. My question for you is, has working on this series changed your relationship with your practice at all? And how do you think this experience will inform your practice going forward?
Absolutely, yes. First of all, so a lot of my time here at WSU, I had been just kind of free-balling it in terms of making images. I was making these collages, and then I was painting from the collage, and then I would paint over these images, and it became this amalgamation of collage and line and see-through and solid imagery. And for this specific body of work, I have actually chosen to pre-plan all my images before I started painting them, as opposed to leaving it more open to chance. That was specifically because I had less time to make all of these paintings. I've made all of this since January. So I've made it all in about 2.5 months, and I'm still processing it. But I think I've learned that pre-planning my images and figuring out what I want to make before I make it has been a huge help in terms of how I create and construct my images, because it allows me to think more about what these images actually mean as opposed to finding meaning later.
I think we have 2 more MFA questions. Let's go with Sarah next.
Hi, I wanted to, I agree with everyone's congratulations on your show. And that was an awesome talk, Stephanie. I guess my questions for you would be more broadly, what prompted your investment in the medium of painting? And I know you already talked about this a little bit, but in that your ideas when you first started were more about the figures themselves, and now they're becoming more about the spaces in between. I just would like to know what the core idea since you began painting would be within the entirety of your work, and how do you see the medium of the paints relating to the images that you make?
Yeah. So I'm definitely not only am I a systematic painter, but I'm a very medium driven artist. I just, ever since I started painting, I just absolutely fell in love with how challenging it is and how fluid the process is. And that I work in series, and I take what I learned and what I think was successful about the last series I did, and then I try and apply that to the next body of work. And I think that what you're seeing in this show is just the continual buildup of what I've learned through my time in undergrad and in graduate school now, of figuring out what I think is working in my own work and applying that to my practice. I am really interested in, I think honestly, why I am using oil paint to talk about space as opposed to being directly about the figure is due to COVID, and thinking about how that has affected how close we can be to each other, gatherings, and it has forced me to be more aware of my surroundings and think of things in a different light. Also, I just love painting. I love oil painting, and I just love making things. I feel like I'm a busybody. I'm always doing things.
Alan, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. First of all, congrats, Stephanie. You made it. And this past year has been quite unprecedented. How has this past year affected your craft with COVID and the pandemic and everything? And now that you're finally done, what's next for the great Stephanie Broussard?
Well, thank you, first of all. Thank you all for the congratulations. Well, first of all, it's affected the way I get feedback on work, as a lot of our critiques have been digitally. So there hasn't been that face-to-face interaction or people directly seeing the work, especially in process. So a lot of that has affected the way I create work and get feedback on work. Also, how I think about what I'm doing in relationship to the subject matter, and how this year has changed what I make work about and how I make it. And as opposed to pulling from experiences with others, thinking about the experiences with the space itself. And what's next? I'm moving to Chicago in May. So for all my Chicago friends, catch me in May, fully vaccinated.
Thank you, everyone, for asking those questions for Stephanie. Stephanie, we do have one faculty question that we got in the chat that might allow you to continue on that thought for just a little bit. David Jansen is asking, where do you see your work expanding in the future in a post-COVID world, still making large-scale works, sculptural elements, question mark?
Well, I think the first move for me is I'm going to be making some small paintings, because I've made a lot of large paintings over the course of this body of work, and I'm excited to make some small work and make it faster than I did this. That's the first step. The second step is applying to more shows and hopefully seeing more of it in person, but also continuing to have more engagement in online platforms, so more people can experience and see it, and getting great friends like Megan and Sean to help me document my work so that I can continue that outreach. And post-COVID world, I honestly really just want to paint some plants. That's what I want to do right now.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much for that wonderful talk. And thank you for joining her and asking these questions. I'd like to give a little bit of a shout out for everyone to look for the WSU Fine Arts Instagram over the next couple of weeks. All the MFAs, some of the ones you've just heard tonight asking questions, and some others as well, will be featuring some short videos that they've made about their practice, really short soundbite type videos, I believe. So keep an eye out for those in the coming weeks. And come and see Stephanie's beautiful paintings here at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, WSU. We are open Tuesday through Friday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Wear your masks, do your attestation for campus, and we'd love to have you in the gallery with Stephanie and her work and some of our other exhibitions as well.
Before we close out, is it okay if my parents come up and say hi? Hi, Mom.
Oh my gosh.
I can't even see.
Your dad.
No, okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're
Congratulations.
very proud of Stephanie. Congratulations. She's the best.
Thank
But we're
you, guys.
biased. Thank you guys for being here and for sharing her. Okay.